Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Euphoric, the podcast. I'm super excited for our guest today. Sam Daly has been someone who's been integral in my business growth and really helping me as a mentor. So I just really wanted to share her wisdom and her story with you all today. So take it away, Sam. Can you describe just really succinctly what you do?
Oh my gosh, I hope so. Thank you for having me on. I'm really excited to chat with your community. So, nowadays, most of my work is centered in spiritual business mentorship. I really love to fuse strategy with spirituality. And I think that's where my zone of genius kind of shines because I love those masculine elements of business when it comes to organization and structure and systems and really strategizing how we're going to do something and keeping your priorities really straight. But I also really love the spiritual side of creating the life of your dreams and leaning into those tools and resources that we have to also make sure that we're feeling fulfilled and that we are a grounded and heart-centered leader and we're doing what we need to reconnect to our own inner knowing and our voice and all of those things. So my journey into coaching in general really started with more like life and mindset coaching. So I worked with a lot of women on relationships, on manifestation, on mindset things. And then the bigger that my business got, the more that I had a lot of those women asking me questions about the journey of building a business and how I was able to do that. And as you know, the more that you kind of wake up, per se, the more that you sort of start to like get curious about what your actual purpose is and wanting to do passion driven work. And so it was this kind of natural progression of a lot of my clients that were from the life and mindset space being like, hang on, I don't really want to do this corporate job anymore. Like, I'm really curious about what you're doing. I want to build a business. And so it just kind of naturally flowed into business mentorship, which is what I do now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that part of your story has been so fascinating to me because it's something that's so similar with how I started. Like I started very much in a niche of just helping people ditch alcohol. And then you're right, it just opens these doors of like, can I do passion-driven work? What is my purpose? What do I came here on this planet to do? And then as you advance as an entrepreneur, it's almost like we gatekeep if we don't share back like the lessons we've learned or the mistakes we've made or the wisdom and the training that we've accumulated since then. And I think I love that as part of my business. And I think you love it too for yours, in that like the business gets to grow with you instead of you always talking backwards to some point in time that you long ago barely even remember. Like, I think that's really hard to do. And I think I've gotten a lot of good advice from you as that, like those transitions and those shifts go. So, on the outside, we'll include all your links to your podcast and to your like bio and your social media and stuff. On the outside, you have this like highly successful coaching business, but like I love your backstory. So how the hell did you even get into this work? Where did you start off from? How did you launch into being such a big leader now? Like what were all the years that nobody saw before that?
Mm, yeah. I think the biggest part of the story is probably me declining my corporate job offers out of school and choosing to move to Spain. So when I was in college, I studied abroad in Spain because I had Spanish for business, like Spanish language for business as a minor of mine. And I really was only studying it for with the hopes that it would allow me to convince my parents to let me go and study abroad. I really wanted to see the world. I'm a Sagittarius and I love travel, but I didn't really get to travel a lot as a kid because it wasn't something that our family really did. And Spanish came pretty easy to me in school. So I just kept studying it in college. I didn't really care that much about it, but I figured, hey, if it's easy enough for me, it'll probably be useful for me in some way, shape, or form in the career force when I get there. And it'll probably get me a ticket to like go and study abroad somewhere. So selfishly, I was studying it for that reason. And I did actually end up studying abroad. And while I was there, I met my partner who you've met. And yeah, like everything kind of shifted. I was dating him while I was there just for fun. I wasn't looking for a long-term relationship or anything. But once I left, I was only there for a semester. Once I left, we stayed in contact and we realized that we had a lot of feelings for each other. There we were like, "Oh my god, I think I'm in love with you. Like we need to see each other again." And so my whole world just kind of got flipped on its head. And after, work like living and studying abroad in Europe and seeing all these different countries, I think I traveled to like 10 different countries in just the short like 3 months that I was there. It really shifted my perspective of the world and made me question a lot of things. I saw people living in a totally different pace, and they cared about stuff that seemed so contrarian to like what we value in American culture. And so I was just like really in this phase of questioning what I wanted to do with my life and what was important to me and values and things like that. And so the more that I thought about it, I had this relationship that I wanted to pursue. I was like, I don't even know if I want this, PR job that I thought I was going to go into anyways. I worked a summer internship that summer and I was in a cubicle and I saw my boss sitting across from me who was, 40, 50 something. And he was, basically doing the same thing that I was doing, which was sitting in a chair all day long, typing on a computer right across the hall from me, who was the intern. And I was like, oh shit, like that's the next phase of this. Like you start here, but then you look ahead in the trajectory to the bosses and it's like, do I want the boss's job even? And I realized, like, no, I don't. So I don't even know if this is the path for me. Like, do I care that much about marketing and PR? So I was just very confused. So I decided I'm gonna decline my corporate job offers. I got a job in Chicago, and I was just like, you know what? I think I'm gonna regret it more if I don't take some time and figure out really who I am and what I want. And so I said no to that job, and I booked a ticket to Spain, and I moved back, and I was like, I'm just going to give myself 1 year. And so I did one of those English, teaching programs there so that you can get this sort of like student visa and live there for a while. And so I was making no money. I was earning a little over $1,000 a month, and over half of that was going to my rent and transportation. And a lot of months I would get to the end of the month and I had nothing in my account, and I was just waiting for my next paycheck to come. But I was 22. So, I wasn't like thinking, oh, this is so bad. But now looking back, I'm like, that was a really brave thing to do when everyone around you is in a phase of life where it's like, this is the next stage. What job offers are you getting? What cities are you moving to? Like, what's your salary? And there's all this excitement. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to move to a foreign country to earn a poverty level wage. Like, yeah, watch me. Woo, go me. So I am really like proud of myself looking back that I had enough intuition, which I didn't even use that language back then, but that's what it was. It was just a gut feeling. It was a knowing that if I didn't try this thing, I would regret it. And so I gave myself a year. And that's kind of where my personal development journey started. Because I was coming off the back of college and I had all this like body image stuff coming up for me because I had gained a lot of weight in school and traveling and drinking. And so, yeah, I started to get back into my yoga practice and listening to podcasts and doing more mindset work. And that unraveled like a whole personal journey for me. And over the 6 years that I was living in Spain, I went really deep in that path. And then I just kind of naturally started sharing it on my Instagram, and I had a blog, and I didn't even know what coaching was, but I just wanted to share like these healthy recipes and like mindset hacks and things that I was learning. And that like naturally kind of turned into a life coaching business. And I got certified. And then, yeah, that's kind of the whole story. But it started really in Spain.
Yeah. So I'm so curious as you're, like the shiny jobs everyone's getting and you go to Spain and barely making any money there. Like, was anyone trying to like do an intervention for you? Was anyone like your parents, were they worried? Was anyone like, what's wrong with Sam? Or like just kind of checking up on you always? Like, did it always feel like you were going to prove them wrong in a way too? Like, did you have an inner knowing that this would ultimately work out for you?
Yeah, people, well, my parents especially, of course, it's their job, to be concerned about the choices that I'm making and to want the best for me. And also to be fair, like they paid a large portion of the bill from the college that I went to, that I got this amazing degree from. I went to an out of state school. It was not cheap. And then, it is a little disrespectful to then just be like, bye, guys, you know? So they had every right to be concerned and to want to have those conversations with me and make sure that I was making a choice that I felt was truly correct. And so I think initially, yeah, they had conversations with me about what I was doing and why I was doing it. And there was some pushback, I think, especially from my dad. And I do remember a conversation in the kitchen with all of my family members. It was my parents and my brother. And I felt like they were all just looking at me like I was so stupid. And my brother was like, this is dumb, Sam. And I was just like, shit, like everyone really thinks I'm making a bad decision. Although my friends, on the other hand, like my college friends, granted, we were all 22, had just graduated. So they're not, the best, but they're going to hype you up no matter what. But they were all really excited for me. They were like, "That's amazing. Like, that's going to be so good for you. Like, go do it." And so it was a mix. It was a mix of some, and I'm sure there was people that didn't tell me their opinion, but were like, "Oh, that's," because people knew that I had met this guy on Tinder while I was studying abroad. And, I think from the outside, it looked very like juvenile and silly of me being like, "Oh, I met this guy. I'm going to go." And everyone was kind of like, good luck. But we are still together. So
Yeah. 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 What an incredible success story. And I love too that, when other people don't understand or it's just you feel like you're not going like I just remember having such a pressure at that age and it was like so made up. Like, no, you
yeah.
didn't have to go race to that job and build your resume. Like you could have taken lots of time off to travel the world. You have so much less responsibilities then. And I don't like to like dwell on regret, but it's just so silly how it is this like, okay, you have to move to this step and this step and this step. And if you even stop to take a break, somehow you're breaking the rule or you're not following along with society wants. And I do think that really gave you a leg up to be able to kind of decide like what you wanted to do. And I'm super curious. So I think you're 6 years younger than me. When I like graduated college, like the online entrepreneurship, obviously entrepreneurship has always existed, but online entrepreneurship was like barely a thing. Like social media was not even a thing really. Coaching, and yes, it's existed in like more an executive format or like an athletic format, but not really in the online space as much. Like, so my career option didn't exist basically when I graduated college. So I'm curious, like as generations are, coming into this world younger and younger and all the things that we already have available to us, when did it really like dawn on you that this was a thing? You know what I mean? Like was like did you grow up watching other coaches or listening to podcasts or was it kind of later that it was like, oh, there's this like world that exists here?
Yeah, I also didn't know that it was a thing. So I graduated in 2016. And I think that's probably right around, 2016, 2017, when we started to see probably like a bit of a rise in like the online coaching. But at that point, I was not informed. I had no idea what it was. So I didn't really find out that coaching was even like a career path until I think 2018. And then I got certified at the end of 2019 and really in 2020 started like going all in on my business and taking it seriously and realizing that it was a path that I could take. So prior to that, I was just like blogging and posting on Instagram. And even at that time, like no one was posting like long captions, like and trying to provide value on Instagram. Like I felt weird doing it, but I'm sure there was, people in the space doing it, but I didn't follow any of those people at the time. So yeah, it was one of my it was a friend of mine who I met on a retreat because I had been interning for an influencer who ran these meditation and yoga retreats. And so I would actually help her plan the retreats and then I would go and help her facilitate on the retreats. And so I did that for a couple of retreats for her in Bali and in Greece. And so one of the girls that I met on that retreat, she was like, "I think I'm going to do this certification for like life purpose coaching." And I was like, "Oh my God, I've never thought of that, but that sounds cool." And it just like fell in my lap really randomly.
Yeah. And now that like, you coach a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs and early entrepreneurs, like do you see a difference sometimes in the younger generation who was like brought up more with this? Like this was more normal for them, whether it's TikToks or podcasting and stuff like that, that it becomes like I just see younger and younger people. And it's basically like, whoa, because like I didn't think I had the confidence back then, but it's also just like none of this stuff was available. Like if you wanted to lean in and really develop yourself, like you had to go searching essentially. It wasn't
Yeah.
mainstream, if anyway. Do you see that trend kind of happening, like younger and younger?
Yeah, and honestly, like I'm happy for them because if I had all of the tools and the knowledge and the podcasts and the books and everything that, we have now when I was a teenager or early 20s, I think that I would have been much better off from like a mindset standpoint and from a self-love standpoint, which is, the first domino I feel in like everything that we ultimately create in our lives, having that confidence that you mentioned. So I'm really glad that the younger generation has more access to these kinds of things. One thing I think though is that, especially with TikTok, there's a lot of conversations about all of these topics. And so a lot of people think that they are experts in these things, or because they've heard about it, almost like they've heard about it so much on TikTok, it becomes white noise, like these buzzwords and therapy things. And that's all becoming like white noise for people. So, whereas for us, when we would go and seek out that information and we would read a really juicy book, that like mindset information would blow our minds and we'd be like, oh my God, I'm going to try this. I'm going to practice this. But when you scroll past 85 videos in a day on TikTok talking about the mindset stuff, it's very easy to just kind of like let it go over your head and feel like because you've heard about it so much, you are embodying it, but not actually implementing it. And so I think that's one challenge of having the information so readily available now is that it's almost becoming white noise for
Mhm.
people.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think younger people coming up in the coaching space definitely have had an advantage, but there's also the disadvantage too of just looking at it as an easy way to make money and potentially not really understanding everything that it encompasses and what it actually means, to deliver results for clients or like all the other stuff that's involved in entrepreneurship as a whole, rather than not just the coaching piece, right? Because you're a coach, but you're also a marketer and you have to handle your finances and bookkeeping and back end stuff and digital marketing and all of those things. And a lot of people don't like those roles.
Yeah, yeah. And that's something I've always appreciated about you is that like that level of emotional intelligence and resilience, I think, is really clear in your brand and the way you coach as well. And I think sometimes what's so hard is that like, I do believe in the coaching industry. I believe like in proper certifications. I believe in like becoming an expert and embodying like what you're teaching. Like I don't want to see that getting so unprofessional in a way that like it almost gets canceled because everyone's just doing this and no one really knows what they're talking about. You know what I mean? So I do want to see that being kept in that way. But I think what's hard is like we become these experts or these coaches, but as we grow into entrepreneurship, it's like we completely forget all those concepts sometimes to our own life. You know what I mean? Because it's like just hard. And I see that happening a lot too with earlier entrepreneurs. It's like you feel so strong when you're doing it and helping someone else, but then like the same issue or the same kind of trigger comes up for you, and it's like you know what I mean? So I'm curious, like this kind of messaging about like this is fulfilling, but it's not easy. Like, how do you
Mhm.
communicate that with your audience who are kind of jumping into coaching or entrepreneurship of like the hardness of it?
Mhm. Yeah, I think I've always just tried to be really like straight up about it. Like I take a pretty no bullshit approach to like everything, in my work. I'm just like this is what it is. So I just basically tell people like entrepreneurship is hard. It's fucking hard. Like if you want to sign up for something easy, this isn't the one. It's not the thing. Like yes, the coaching industry is a really incredibly lucrative space. You can do work that you love. If you're really passionate about it, that's amazing. But I think what people don't realize is that you're still an entrepreneur, right? So if I wanted to go start a restaurant or some brick and mortar business or some other avenue, there's still all of the different like growing pains of entrepreneurship and building a business that are behind it is what kind of what I was saying before. It's not just the coaching. There's so many other hats that you have to wear and there's so many other parts of it. And I do think like entrepreneurship is such a such an incredible tool for spiritual growth because you do get triggered a lot and you do get sidetracked or pulled into other directions, especially with social media and seeing what everyone else is doing all the time and thinking, oh, shoot, should I be running my business like that? Or should the product suite be like that? Or this is really working for that person. Maybe I should do that. Or their social is crushing it. Let me study what they're doing. Maybe I need to change. Should I do that? And there's just challenges left, right, and center, client things, behind the scenes stuff, navigating the changes in your schedule and trying to have a work life balance and maintaining a partnership with someone who either works in the business for you or does something completely different and doesn't understand. Like, whatever your circumstance is, there's going to be a lot of challenges just from being an entrepreneur, regardless of like what your vehicle of choice is or what your business is, whether it's coaching or not. And so I think I've always just tried to be really transparent about that of like, yeah, it's hard, it is hard. Emotionally, it's hard. Financially, I think it's really challenging because most humans really strongly desire this sense of safety and security and certainty. Those are like core values and drivers for a lot of people. You don't get that when you generate the income. When you are the person that has to create it. You don't get that. So you have to navigate this whole journey of scarcity and abundance mindset and launch roller coasters and numbers dipping and are people going to sign up and having really high months and really low months and then having really intense business expenses and questioning, should I be spending on that or should I cut back? What are we putting in savings? Like you you have to navigate a lot of things that other people don't have to navigate. And you don't know what your income is going to be every single month.
Yeah, yeah. I think for me, like obviously I go through those problems and I like can stress out through them as I'm going through them, but I think it's also like what is so alluring to me about it too. It's like
Hmm.
you won't get bored. You will not get bored for sure. And there's always progress and a challenge to be made. You know, like there's always something that's not keeping you bored and is keeping you like really stimulated and you're always learning. And even if you're at the zenith, like things change and you have to relearn all the new changes that are coming or ways to re-engage your audience or something like that. So it's just really intriguing, I think, in like a intellectually stimulating kind of a way. And I love that. Like I love thinking about my business like every day and just like, I mean, I can obviously take the time off and have completely off days, but just it keeps me coming back. You know what I mean? In a way
Hmm.
that other jobs just haven't had that pull, that sense of fulfillment towards. Plus the helping of other people, like when you know you've helped someone change a belief or a mindset about like something they found lacking in themselves, like that is the most powerful feeling in the world, and I think it's really valuable and fulfilling if obviously, this is what you're interested in and you kind of recognize that it's not, I don't think, hard in the sense of like physically we're not doing anything hard, you know what I mean? Like people have some hard ass jobs in this planet, but
Yeah.
that's just the mental kind of roller coaster that you learn to ride instead of letting it kind of overtake your system. It's just something that's just part of the journey. And I love this one quote by James Wedmore is that like your business grows based on how many problems you can solve.
Mm.
Because, or not just solve, but just hold. Because if like you freak out because a client payment defaults or something, like that's just business and it's going to keep growing with a bigger business, you know what I mean? And just reminding myself like these are just graduation marks along the way to like what you really want is really alluring.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think it's so interesting to think about, like, when you first started your business, what you felt was hard or challenging, and then to look at like what feels hard or challenging in your business now, and you're like you can almost like kind of like look back and smile or laugh a little bit because the things that felt like really big problems are just, something that you breeze through really quickly now. But that's kind of why I said entrepreneurship is a I think it's a really great spiritual growth tool, personal growth tool, because you learn how to tackle and hold so much along the way.
Yeah. And I think that's just a testament too to your work. Like I think this has matured you in such incredible ways to have this like level of wisdom at your age and just be able to like hold so much space for people. It's like I don't think if you didn't go on this journey, if you chose path B, like who knows who you would have been in that capacity. You know what I mean? So I do see
Hmm.
that it's not just like success is something that's just like granted upon people. I mean, sometimes obviously these things can happen, but it's really like that inner journey of like working on yourself and being able to hold space for this kind of stuff that really can develop you into that kind of leader. And I love that word, the leader part of it too, because I think that a leader can hold so much more of this, the good, the bad, and not let it, it's like the equanimity that we're trying to hold on to, and not let it like kind of take us over is important. Plus, that's what
Hmm.
like we try to do with our clients too.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of people, when they think about leadership, they think about the like the outward expressions of leadership, of having people that want to follow you or people that look up to you or, they listen to everything that you say and your advice and stuff like that, or being able to influence people. And that surely is part of leadership. But there's also like the internal part of leadership, which is actually being the leader and holding that frequency of being able to have chaos happening around and you standing steady as, the firm pillar.
Yeah, yeah. So switching topics just a little bit. You had mentioned once that like if you can't get people to walk in with door number one for you, how can you get them to walk into door number two, number three? And what I take that to mean is like, how can you get them to pay? If you can't get them to pay attention, they're never going to buy anything or work with you in any deeper capacity. And copy is something that you are just a master at. You're really good at like using incredibly vivid and yet like kind of punch in the gut kind of words to like really put a point across. I'm really curious, A, both how you got good at like writing copy and really expressing yourself through language like that, and also two, how do you help other people improve their copy? And this is obviously copy stuff that we can use in our Instagram posts or in our sales pages or on our website or anything like that. That's what I mean by copy. It's the words we use, right? So I'm curious how you got good at it and how you help people get better at it.
Yeah, I think that part of it is like natural talent. I'm not going to deny that. I think a lot of it comes naturally to me. I have always been talented in like the space of communication or synthesizing ideas or taking something really complex and boiling it down for someone. Or I wanted to be a teacher when I was growing up because I had this sort of like natural gift of being able to take in information and then, give it back in a way that was really easy to digest. So I do think that part of it is natural talent, but I also think that when I'm writing copy or I'm, doing hooks or sales pages or anything like that, email subject lines, podcast titles, all that stuff, I'm always thinking about the other person who's on the receiving end of that, and really wanting to answer the question of like, why should they care? What in this is going to make them give a shit? Because we are in an attention economy, and it is the most limited resource that we have. And it's the most coveted and highly valuable. If you can capture someone's attention, that's everything in today's world, right? That's why social media is so big. That's why advertisers pay so much money to be on those platforms, because they want people's attention. It is so extremely valuable. Because there's so much noise nowadays, I'm constantly thinking about, how could I make this stand out? What is really going to catch their eye? What's a word that I could use that might, hit them, punch them in the gut, like you said, or potentially even be controversial? It might trigger some people, but I want to say it in a way that stops a scroll and that grabs attention. So, tips for other people is like, ask yourself that question, like, why should someone care? Because most people are not going to take the time to read your entire paragraph or spend the time to get two-thirds of the way through your sales page to really figure out the meat and potatoes of what you're trying to offer. Like, you got to get them right away. You got to hook people in at the top. So we're wanting to speak to that idea of, what are they going to get out of this? Like, people are always asking as consumers, what is in this for me? Right? Because there's so much, we can't pay attention to everything. So even something as simple as an Instagram post, but it's like I'm subconsciously asking myself or wondering as I'm scrolling, what's in this for me? Or is this relevant to me? And so if
Mhm.
you're not answering that question for the consumer or for the eyes right away, you're probably going to get missed. Right? So that's one really easy place to start for copy.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I love it. And, check out her Instagram. It's a lot of those posts that you'll recognize that level of attention and detail at. So I love that. Okay, switching gears again. How did you go from like an international fling with, someone you met when you were in college, basically, to actually building a solid partnership and deciding to move back to the United States and kind of building a life together here?
Yeah, that's a great question. I ask myself this often. I'm like, how did I don't even know. Like I met him when we were both 21, which is like so crazy to think that, we're still together and we've built this really strong relationship. But I think a lot of it comes down to mutual respect and sharing similar values, and both being ambitious individuals who really want the best for ourselves and for each other. And so, whatever the other person's goal is or what they're trying to achieve, we have, a partner in each other that's like, yes, you can do that. Go after it. And we're curious and we're interested in what the other person is doing. And I think that was, I noticed so much as I started to grow my business while we were still living in Spain. I noticed so much how supportive he was. And I was hearing all these stories from women because I did network marketing for a while. And, that's very polarizing. There's a lot of people that have many feelings about network marketing. But the point being, I had a lot of people that I was in communication with where I would hear all these stories of their partners really like discouraging them and tearing them down and talking down on their ideas. And why are you posting on Instagram? And I even had a client whose partner said, if you become one of those girls who talks on our Instagram stories, like, I'm going to break up with you. Like, it was so crazy to see all of this kind of toxicity. And then to see my partner literally just being the number one supporter in whatever it was that I wanted to do. Because I did many things before I was super successful in this business. I mentioned that I was teaching English and I had a unpaid internship at the time for an influencer, and I was selling shampoo on my Instagram, and I was blogging, and I was doing a bunch of random shit, and none of it was really making that much money. But everything that I did, he was like, "That's so great." And he really was just so supportive. I think he's actually better at that than I am. just like blindly, so wanting the best for me. And if something makes me happy, he's happy for me. And so I think that's probably the thing that allowed us to go through that like early 20s kind of like stage and actually have a longer lasting relationship. Now we're both 30, and it's because we're genuinely supportive of each other. We want the best for each other, and we share similar values, and we both are ambitious. So when the other person wants to work or has a goal or wants to do something, we're not judging it. We're like, all right, this is what we're doing. We're a team.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I love that like level of support, and especially the support was there like no matter what you did. And I'm curious when it came to actually the personal development and the mindset kind of like coaching that you were doing. Is he someone who like bought into some of those concepts as well? Because that's like a something I often hear from women I work with is like guys just aren't as into personal development as we are. And I think that's an okay thing. We don't want to marry carbon copies of ourselves. But I'm curious about that.
Yeah. So I started like really heavily in manifestation and doing some of these like more spiritual practices. And I think those are a lot of the things. And like I was so interested in like astrology, and that's such a hot topic for men to just be like, oh, that's not real. Um he never looked down on any of it. He never was like, that's dumb or that's silly or that's not real. But there were certain things that he didn't care to like get invested in personally himself, but he was always, like, happy for me. Like I said, it was like, if it's making you happy and you love it, like, go for it. I don't need to be interested in soccer. He's Spanish, so soccer is life, and I don't need to be watching every game with him or be obsessed with the soccer, but I support the fact that that's something that's important to him and that he loves to do. So it was just kind of like that. But I think the more, and I never really tried to like push him onto things, but I'm lucky that he's a very open-minded individual, even though he comes from a traditional like Catholic country, and some of like the mindsets there can be a little bit more closed to certain things, but he's always just been pretty open-minded. So I never tried to push him into personal development concepts, but naturally over, just being with me and around me and hearing me all the time and seeing what I do, it kind of rubbed off on him eventually. And then he started reading his own books that were, personal development, but maybe a little bit more, tending towards what might be of interest to a man, you know? And so he's definitely like broadened his horizons a lot in terms of personal development.
Yeah, yeah. That's like pretty similar with my husband too. And I think what has really happened too is that we just the vision's been broadened. Like what we believe the trajectory of our life is going to bring is so different today than what we believed. We've been together for 13 years, so like 13 or 10 years ago and stuff like that. And some of the things he might have just not believed were possible from just a very practical, logical standpoint of like, well, that's just not how most people live their life. But I think that level of just possibility, I think, has really changed within my husband, which is great. And that's like, as long as like they're on board, like I don't need, them to read the same books or listen to the same
Yeah.
podcast. Like that would be super boring, if anything, because then you would lose your uniqueness and what makes you interesting and what you care about. Okay, last question for you. What are you most passionate about like today? Like what really like just riles you up and something you want to like speak your heart on, something you wish other women knew? I know that I'm sure there's so many things in your life that you've felt this way about, but is there anything coming up like right now in the present moment, in the present era?
Mm. Yeah. I think right now, what's probably most present for me is just really being ruthless about following your own path and not needing to do what everyone else is doing and not getting caught up in getting lost in the comparison, or looking left and right all the time and seeing what everyone else is doing and making it mean something about your path. Everyone's journey, especially when it comes to entrepreneurship and success, is going to look wildly different, and there's no one right formula. And just because something is working for someone else doesn't mean that it necessarily aligns with you and your values or how you want the journey to feel as you grow towards your success. I mean, like there's people in this industry that grows super quickly. And that can be jarring, especially if you're someone who's been working on something for a really, really long time. And I just think it's the worst thing to be constantly comparing yourself to other people's timelines and their journeys and their product suites and what they're selling and how they're doing everything. Like blinders on. Stay in your lane, know who you are. And that all comes back to the inner work that we've been talking about. If you have a strong sense of self and you are confident in your vision and your mission and knowing what you want your journey to look like and understanding that what you're doing is your life's work and you don't need to be rushing all the time and you don't need to be looking at what other people are doing, then you can actually be more focused and create a path that's enjoyable. I think a lot of people are having these super quick spurts of success from whatever it is that they're doing, but then they burn out or they realize I don't even like this, or I've built a business that is feels like a cage, and so really doing that sort of sustainable, slow, in your own lane, moving at your own pace, just focused kind of work to grow. That's something that I'm really passionate about, clearly.
Yeah. And how do you like implement that? How do you, because I think it's like whatever we're brought up in at first, this like analogy applies to like even the corporate kind of, just because that's someone else's dream doesn't mean it might be yours. Like you need to listen to your heart, not what society's been telling you to do up until this point. And now in kind of in this world, right, we're brought up by all the like kind of peers we have at the same time, or just what other like, leaders are doing on the internet. And so then that can like really inform and program our mind essentially of like, this is what this is supposed to look like. So how do you implement that but still find yourself either inspired by some of those leaders or just being kind of like relevant and having a pulse on what's going on? Like how do you personally manage that?
Yeah, I think that's a good question because there's times where if I'm trying to create something, if I'm trying to bring something to life, whether it's a new offer or a rebrand or whatever it is, I like to fully kind of close off. So I don't really want to see anyone else in my industry, what they're doing. I don't want to know anything about the competition. And I know there's a lot of people that function that way as well. Like they never follow anyone who does the same thing as they do because they don't want to be influenced because it does happen so subconsciously. Like you don't even realize it. But because you've consumed a couple of videos, like that's now an idea in the back of your head. And then your content kind of starts to look like that. And so to keep the originality and also peace of mind and creative space, I do like to have certain seasons where I'm completely, just putting my blinders on. And we do that inside of Top Tier. You probably remember like the Creative Vortex Challenge where I tell you guys like unfollow everyone in your industry and probably the business coaches too, because that'll pull you in a lot of different directions. But that's not always going to be sustainable forever because you want to stay tapped in. You want to know what's going on and be inspired, as you said. And so I think it really has to come down to like being extremely intuitive about who you're letting into your media diet, essentially, because a lot of it is from these marketing tactics that are trying to make you feel wrong for how you're doing things or that you could be doing it in a better way or you're not going faster because of this and your business is not growing because of this and your social media sucks because of this. And it's that kind of marketing that makes us take something that didn't need to mean anything and suddenly we create a meaning out of it and then we spiral, right? So being really really careful and intuitive with whose advice it is that you want to take and follow and make sure that you are following happy mentors, not just rich ones. That's something that my mentor told me at the start of this year. And there's a lot of people that are, happy and rich, and that's great. And there's a lot of people that are really rich and pretending to be really happy. And so using your intuition to really guide you in terms of who are the right people to allow into my sphere and into my media diet, especially.
Yeah. And kind of taking the other angle, like, this is to protect our space and ourselves. But if someone is the one who's generating copy or content, which like we all are, how do you kind of divide that, like the marketing kind of like, oh, you should be doing it like this, or if you want to do this, you should do that, versus like kind of some of those bolder, more controversial things that you were saying also really help kind of reel people in. So like, how do you make sense of like, am I doing this too? You know what I mean?
Yeah. 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 Such a good question. Such a good question. And I think for okay. So for me, it's really like an energetic. I can feel the energy behind someone's post. I can feel when it's sort of like talking down, like mean girl kind of energy, where It's really trying to throw me out of my power in order to make me feel like I need something that they have. Okay, so that's like one energetic that I think you can feel. There's another one which is where I'm being a little bit like spicy or polarizing as we call it, but I'm still seeing you in your power. And you can kind of feel the energy through the phone in the post where it's like, damn, like she basically just called me out with that, but from a loving space, right? Rather than from a, trying to throw you out of your power so that you feel like you need something so that you'll buy from me sort of space. So I
Yeah.
do think that there's an energy to it. And if your energy is pure behind it, then you're probably in the green. With that being said, people are always going to be triggered no matter what you do. And so there's definitely probably people out there that are like, "Well, I have to unfollow you and I can't watch your posts because your marketing makes me feel like that." And that's totally fair. But so then that's the personal responsibility part, which is like we all have to play our role of doing what we need to do to be able to stay in our own lane. And if you
Yeah.
need to unfollow me to stay in your own lane, then that's totally fine.
Yeah. One last thing, and I hope this is really short so I can respect your time today, but what's something that you would do again that you did to first start growing your business? So I know we probably can look back easily and be like, okay, that was a mistake. I wasted too much time with this. I did that. But like, what was something that you did that you're really proud of that like really worked towards the beginning? Was it like showing up a lot or anything like that that you would just say, if you're starting within the first year or so, like, please focus on this?
Mm. Yeah, a couple of things. I think early days was talking on stories or on some sort of video. Now it would probably be like Reels or TikTok, but at the time all we really had was like stories. So showing up on video regularly, basically every day to talk and communicate and share with my audience. The other thing is starting a podcast. That's been tremendous for my business and personal brand and growing like no one trust with uh, listeners that end up turning into clients. So I would absolutely do that again and recommend that people do it if they feel like they have the personality and the desire to have a podcast.
Yeah. Awesome, Sam. Well, thank you so much for your wisdom today, for all of your beautiful advice and your story. Where can people find you online?
Yeah. So I mostly hang out on Instagram. You guys can come follow me at underscore Samantha Daily. If you want to check out the podcast, it's called Makeshift Happen. You can find it on all platforms, Spotify, Apple, and now we're doing full video episodes on YouTube, which is exciting. So you can find us over there at Samantha Daily.
Awesome. Well, we'll be sure to include all those links in the show notes. And Sam, thank you so much for your time today.
Yes, thank you.